Amanda, it's such a treat to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to see you. It's been a long time.
It has been. I think the last time I saw you was like July of maybe 2 years ago, and it was at that cafe on 17th and R. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. I do. Yes, my old hood.
Yes, yes, the hood. And now you're traveling the world.
I am. I am. Yeah. So when I saw you, I was in my second year of working at the White House. I did one more year. And then in 2023, right before Thanksgiving, decided to leave the job and travel. So I did a 6 week trip and then decided I wasn't done. So came back and moved out of my apartment. You and I had been near neighbors for almost 20 years, I think, in Washington. Put my stuff in storage, bought myself a one-way plane ticket to New Zealand, and I haven't been back to Washington since.
That's amazing. Do you have a plan to return?
I will have to come back at some stage. I want to see friends and see family over the holidays. And interestingly, I am getting increasingly aggressive emails from doctors' offices reminding me that I am overdue for all of my annual exam. We'll come back at some stage. I guess the challenge of having put all my stuff in storage is I now don't live anywhere. And so I will need to be mindful about where I live, whether that's in Washington or somewhere else. So that is the TBD part of my current sabbatical.
Wow, I love it. And you know what I also love is that we reconnected over orangutans because I think you saw that I was going on the retreat and it was sold out. And then you went on a retreat or, to a sanctuary. So we'll have to touch on that because I really want to
I
explore that with
absolutely,
you.
it was the greatest joy of my year.
Oh my gosh, such a delight. And have you seen Orangutan Jungle School? It's like
Yes,
oh my
yes,
God,
I have been binging all the orangutan shows. Yes, everybody watching
amazing.
this, go see the
Go. Yes, go support them. No more palm oil to the best of your ability, only sustainable, and I'll stop my soapbox. But yes, so let's talk about your journey into midlife and what led you to be like last year. You're like, okay, I'm going to travel. I'm going to put myself in storage. I'm out of here. Like, what has been your trajectory and how your perspective has shifted?
Yeah, so like I said, had lived in Washington for 19 years, and I think met you very soon after I got there. I moved there in 2005, and a friend of a friend introduced me to yoga. She took me to Tranquil Space. She bought me my first yoga mat, and so yoga really has been a big part of my journey over the last 19 years. But I've had three different jobs in the U.S. government. Worked in Congress, worked at the State Department, and then most recently worked at the White House. And after all three of those jobs, which were very intense, long hours, I decided to take sabbaticals. I took the decision to take the first sabbatical actually after our yoga retreat to India. I came back and told the chairman of the committee that I had been meditating on the banks of the Ganges and had an epiphany that it was time for me to leave government. He looked a little shocked and said he wondered what would happen if he meditated on the banks of the Ganges. And I told him we should give it a try. The second time was after I did a yoga retreat in Peru in the Sacred Valley near Machu Picchu and made the decision then. And then this time actually was after a trip to Alaska. But I think for me, really, it was trying to reintegrate balance into my life. And I found with all three of those jobs, my life was very heavily focused on the work side and less on the personal side. So I think, as my psychologist father would say, I had been focusing on my doing side and I needed to focus on my being side. And took sabbaticals after all three of those jobs. And this current one has been the biggest and the most dramatic in terms of packing up my apartment and setting out on a period of, I really like the Aboriginal idea of going walkabout, which is a mindful period of wandering away from daily responsibilities. So I didn't set out to try and tick off as many countries off a list as I could, but really set out to find joy, to find creativity, and to really give myself time and space to think and reflect so that I could be intentional going into the next phase of my life.
And as you're talking, I'm just thinking practicalities for our listeners. And you don't have kids, right? And I
Yeah.
guess you don't have any fur children, do you?
No, I bought
No.
a
Okay.
plant during the pandemic, which is the only living thing that I had taken into my house. And I had to adopt that out to a plant loving friend.
I love that. Yeah. That's funny. But yeah, and so from a practicality perspective, and then I guess you just saved, right? You were really good at saving and
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways of being able to take sabbaticals. The last time I did it, I had consulting income. And so I was able to engage in a lot of reflection and travel and activities while having the regular consulting income coming in. I did meet two families on my current trip who were taking travel sabbaticals with children. They put their stuff in storage. They sold their house. One family bought a sailboat and sailed around the world. Another family from California that I met was traveling in Asia with their children. So obviously, all of this is much more complicated with kids. It requires certainly a degree of money, or at least a job that can be done remotely. But yeah, as you said, I didn't have a partner, don't have children, don't even have any pets, and was living pretty frugally in Washington, was renting a studio. So I didn't even have to rent out a house. I've never owned a car. I take the bus when I go to New York. I'm a good Midwesterner, and so was not spending a lot of money. And frankly, over the last 5 years between the pandemic and working really long hours in the White House, I wasn't spending a huge amount of money anyway. So definitely am dipping into savings. But as friends remind me when I get a little anxious about this, it's what we save money for, and I feel fortunate to be in the position to be able to do it. And really, the main reason that I gave up my apartment is that was $2,000 that I wasn't spending. And some of those finances can end up working out almost the same when you're not paying rent if you're staying in hostels or other cheap accommodation.
yes, no, absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking you've saved so much money by having your stuff in storage.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm paying $200 for my stuff to live in a warehouse in Virginia, as opposed to $2,000 for me to live with my stuff in Washington. I've been staying with a lot of friends, which has been a huge expense. And really, paying for my Obamacare health insurance has been my biggest expense every month. Otherwise, I've been able to keep my costs pretty low.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that. I just wanted to mention practicality because I was like, some listeners may be like, how in the world could I do that? But what I love is what you said is we save for these things, right? And if you think about it, so many people save for to do this in retirement. And by then, A, may not make it to retirement. B, our bodies are so different. Our energy levels can be so different, not for everyone. And so it's really lovely for you making this a priority earlier in life.
Absolutely. I did a hiking trip 2 years ago in the Swiss Alps and hurt my knees, and am generally fine, but my knees are tweaky when I walk. And it was a really vivid reminder that my joints are getting older and I'm not necessarily going to be able to hike mountains forever. And so doing something, the orangutans, which involves a certain amount of trekking in the rainforest, hopefully I will still be alive in my 70s and still able to do that, but maybe not. And so there was stuff that I really wanted to do. And similarly, with this family that sailed around the world, the friend of mine said he thought he would do that after his kids went to university. And then he thought, you know what, this is actually an experience I really want to share with my kids. And so found a way to make it a possibility now rather than waiting 10 years and doing it on his own without his family along.
I love that because we wait, right? And what are we waiting for? And I know maybe there's always a better time or I'll have more money or whatever. I totally get it. And yet it's like, what do we miss out on by not taking chances
No,
responsibly?
absolutely. 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 My father was killed in a car accident 5 years ago driving to work. And that was obviously a major trauma, a major shock, but it was also this reminder that you just don't know how long you're going to get. And so, exactly to your point, we wait and we save, and that day may not come. One of the memes that I saw on Instagram that I thought about a lot during my trip was 20 years from now, you would give anything to have the health you have, to be in the place that you have. So go out and do some main character shit before it's too late. And
Yes.
so that was very much my mantra for the past year, and really wanting to take advantage of being in good health, having this time and being in a position where I've got this money to go out and do things like tick off the orangutans, which was top of my bucket list.
Can we just talk about the orangutans for a moment?
Yes.
Oh my God. I feel like I'm going to get teary. Oh my God, what an amazing experience. I even last week I was at a conference at the Omni Shoreham. You probably know that hotel. And I was like, during lunch, I could go up and see an orangutan. And then I got there, I just smiled and I had to get right back, but it like made me so happy. And so I love that you said before we started recording that you've been obsessed since you were 5. I think I would probably say about the same thing. And so to be able to see them in the wild, oh my God. So tell me about your experience.
Totally. So I had the Fisher Price camera that many of us probably had, with that you would click through and it was all the pictures of the animals. And that was when I first encountered orangutans then and became obsessed with them. I've had the opportunity to go trekking with the gorillas in Uganda. I have sought out monkeys everywhere I have been on these trips, but it was always just the orangutans. The fact that they share 95% of their DNA with us, they are so human and just endlessly fascinating to watch. And I had thought about going various times over the last couple of years. And there was the terrible fires in Indonesia, Malaysia in 2017 that destroyed a huge part of the jungle. There's been some security issues out there. The population is sadly dwindling. But I was like, I need to go. And I also felt if something, knock on wood, happened to me and I was no longer able to travel, this would be the single most regret that I would have had in my life of never having gone out to see them. And so went out to Borneo and Indonesia and joined a group, and we spent several days on a boat. We went out to the feeding platforms, and then we went to the Orangutan Survival Foundation, where they have been rehabilitating orangutans and preparing them for release in the wild. And I told people it's like sending your kids off to college, and if they need a little additional work, you bring them back home and retrain them on doing laundry and cooking, and then you send them back out in the wild. So we were in wooden canoes and trekking around the island and seeing them in their natural habitat. And I, like you, it just made me teary. It was just such an extraordinary experience to be able to see them in the wild, and also just this fulfillment of this dream that I had since I was a child.
Yes, no, I love it. Did you see Obama by chance?
No.
The orangutan. Yeah. There's one named Obama that was just like really so adorable and was catching coconuts. But yeah, they've named all these animals such fun names. And did you get to see the school, like the orangutan jungle school by chance?
I did not. I did, but I have been watching that on Netflix. So yes, teaching them that snakes are dangerous and how to respond it's amazing.
It's amazing. And somehow I got the ability to go, and we saw them in school. And then we saw them when they come back from school and they're all revved up. And listeners, the thing about the orangutans and why they're being taught to be orangutans is they have lost their mothers. So they're orphans. And so they're quite young. And so they don't know anything, usually with their moms till they're like 8. And so they teach them. And I think the main thing, they have to teach them how to nest, forage for food. And what is the other thing? There's 3 things they have to get
Probably
before.
like predators, how to respond to snakes and danger, and
yeah, to be aware of the threats. Yeah, with the snake that they bring out.
yes.
And yeah, it's like it's amazing to watch them because they are so human and they're so funny and quirky. And yeah, so I'm so glad you got to experience that.
No, it was wonderful. And it was fun to watch your trip right before mine. And yeah, no, it was yet another thing that you and I have in common, between yoga and all the various retreat adventures that we've had.
Yeah, such a journey. I'm curious for you from a kind of wellness standpoint and being on the road as you have been for almost a year now. What are some things that you're doing to make sure you're able to take care of yourself? Clearly, you're going to be active. I get that. Did you tote any creature comforts along, or what are your go-tos?
Yeah. So the one thing I would say is doing high stress jobs like I did in the White House and in government was actually really mindful about wellness practices. And I think took a lot from yoga and past experiences in that community. And so really did my best to try and stay as healthy as I could in that job. I really prioritized getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night if I could. I developed during the pandemic a 10-minute morning yoga practice. And so I managed to do that every morning when I was working at the White House. I would love to be the kind of person that could wake up and do an hour of yoga or HIIT or whatever it is in the morning, but an hour is just too much. But 10 minutes is very doable, and found lots of online resources. And so that I did. I walked a lot. I did a lot of cooking on the weekends. I made lentil soup, I made chili, and then I would freeze things in my fridge at home and then also in my freezer in the office. And so instead of making late night runs to the cafeteria to get French fries, I had healthy, wholesome food and made sure that I stocked my desk with apples and nuts. And so really did everything I could in the job to try and take care of my health. I tried to drink a lot of water. I was mindful about my relationship with alcohol. And so did my best despite being in a very stressed environment to take care of myself as much as possible. Interestingly, on the trips, it's been a bit more challenging in some ways. I have been staying either in youth hostels or Airbnbs or on friends' couches. I've been mindful of having a limited budget. And so sometimes have struggled a bit to try and find ways to eat healthily and also inexpensively. I don't want to eat pizzas all the time. And sometimes there's not sweet green in all of these places to find salads. I'm currently staying with a friend in Portugal, which has given me the opportunity to be able to go to the grocery store and buy my own food. I've also had the opportunity to try out yoga classes in lots of different places. I went to one this morning here in Lisbon. I was in Bali for part of my trip and had the opportunity to do a lot of yoga there. I've definitely been doing a huge amount of walking everywhere, which has been my main form of exercise, I think. Not much in the way of creature comforts. I have been living out of a 50-pound suitcase basically for the last 9 months. So I'm ready to burn most of my clothes, but it's also been a useful lesson in how you can survive on relatively little things.
Did you pack like earplugs and eye masks and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
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 Yes. Yes. If that is your definition of creature comforts, I definitely took an eye mask and earplugs. Took one set of yoga clothes and bought a second pair of yoga pants in Sydney for $5 with very snazzy leopard print on them for taking along to Bali. So got a few bits and pieces of things along the way, but really have been living off fairly limited amounts of clothing.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, lots of washing and rewearing. And yeah, this makes getting dressed easier in the morning because you're like the shirt or the shirt.
Yeah. That's amazing. Because I was thinking 50 pounds. I was like, I took, and it was really big for me, but a 50-pound suitcase to adult ballet festival that was 5 days. So I love that you have it for 9 months. So anyway.
It's yoga clothes and pajamas and a bathing suit and a rash guard and hiking pants and a fleece. So it's been hot weather gear and cold weather gear and a little pajamas, a little knee brace for when I go hiking, some yoga clothes. So I have one of lots of things.
Yeah, so smart.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk creativity and passion. So I'm curious about your journey here because, of course, before we started recording, we talked a little bit about that. And yeah, so how has especially such a heady career that you've had, how has your relationship to creativity shifted or started?
Yeah, no, that's been huge for me. And I think really in recent years, my relationship with creativity has been pretty non-existent. And so that's a lot of what this year was trying to course correct. I think to go back again to experiences that you and I have had together, you for many years did New Year's Eve yoga retreats. And I always found those really profound experiences, actually. It was such a meaningful way to be able to reflect on the past year and to be able to set goals for the year ahead. And one of the exercises that you always had us do was the wheel of life. And so I continued doing that on my own, actually, often on New Year's Eves, even if there wasn't a yoga retreat that I was able to go to. And it was something that I thought about a lot when making the decision to leave my job and embark on this trip. And obviously, my career was very good. My health was in a pretty good place. I was feeling pretty good about relationships with friends and family. But my creativity score for the last number of years was just incredibly low. It was always the bottom thing. And it is easy to let that go when you're stacking it up against things like your job and your health. And so it just wasn't something that I was prioritizing and making time for. I think during the pandemic, we obviously didn't have access to things like museums and theater and restaurants and stuff that I enjoyed. And I've always struggled to be a person with hobbies. I always think I was going to take Spanish classes when I was a grad student. And so they were talking to me in Spanish to try and understand my level of Spanish. And they asked what my hobbies were. And I thought for so long, not because I didn't know the word in Spanish, but because I couldn't actually articulate any of my hobbies, that they thought I couldn't speak Spanish. But again, that was a reminder 20 years ago about needing to get hobbies. So to come back to this current trip, my main focus and guiding theme, I think, for this has been to try and rediscover joy and to try and experience creativity in all of its forms. And so I have taken the time in the different countries that I've been in. I spent 2 months in New Zealand, 2 months in Australia, 2 months in Indonesia, and now I've been in various countries in Europe for the last 2 months. I've taken time to go to the art museums and to concerts and tried my hand at Aboriginal dot art. I did a silent meditation retreat and had the adult coloring books. I've always loved taking photographs and I've done a lot of that. The orangutans were a part of that. Spending time in nature, meeting new people, trying new activities. And I felt like my soul was just starved of some of this creativity and joy. And so really have dedicated this year to trying to soak it up in all of its forms. And it's been as wonderful as it probably sounds like it would be.
Yeah, no, I'm so proud of you because it
Thank
is.
you.
Yeah, it's so important, I think, to recognize like, oh, this is something I need in my life. And that's what can be so helpful about looking at that life review of just and regularly, right? Of just, oh, this area is just not feeling so good. I need to give more attention here or there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I acknowledge it's pretty dramatic to quit your job and go off and spend a year doing that. But it's also made me think eventually I need to return to gainful employment. But the creativity is really something that I want to bring in. I stayed with a woman who was very into knitting. And developed a new appreciation for that, both in terms of making beautiful things, but having something that occupies your hands really as almost a mindfulness activity. Photography has always been a passion. I will say here that I have always wanted to learn to play the guitar. And so when I eventually, I think most of my hobbies, apart from things like yoga, have been much more cerebral in terms of reading books and writing. And I have come, especially on this trip, to appreciate the utility of things with your hands, like guitar, like knitting. A friend of mine back in Washington was always very big into crafting. And there's something about just being very tactile with your hands and focusing on a particular project that is not intellectually oriented, that's just really relaxing. And I have a much greater appreciation for that now than I think I did before.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And I hope you do get those guitar lessons.
Yeah, you can check back in. Yes.
I will. I will. And speaking career, what are you thinking? Do you want to come back to DC or are you looking at other cities?
Yeah, that's the TBD part of the trip right now. We've got an election coming up in the US, and so we will see how that goes in either direction. That was an experience the last 2 jobs that I left, and that creates either more or less job opportunities or makes places either more or less desirable, depending on how some of those things go. I think the challenge and the exciting part of this is making the decision to having left opens up this whole world of possibilities right now. So in a way, I feel the 21-year-old that takes the gap year after university and now has to decide which of the many things in life and which of the many paths they want to take. It's nicer doing that in my 40s than it was in my 20s because I've got a little bit of money and some experience behind me. But I think also after this trip, really want to be mindful about what it is I do next. So, and part of this goes back to what you and I were talking about before, which is this recognition that time is finite. And I think often when we're in our 20s and we're at the start of our career, you've got to put the time in, you're willing to do the grind. And I think one of the things that started to shift for me is wanting to be much more mindful and intentional about how I use my time. Who am I spending my time with? What sort of job am I having? Where am I living? What are the environmental factors that make me happy? I grew up in Michigan, near Lake Michigan, and water has always made me happy. And I have found on this trip, I've been very drawn to places where I'm near the water. So is that something that I'm able to incorporate into what I do next? That is a big TBD right now, but I think this past year has given me a lot of time and space to think about that and a lot of opportunity to engage with friends and people that are living very different types of lives. When I was in Australia, for example, I stayed with friends everywhere I went. A lot of these people were friends that I had made when I was in my 20s and we were all in Europe. They moved home and I moved home. And so staying with people for a week, you basically drop into somebody's life. And so I was going on carpools with moms. I was going to book clubs. I was going to high school netball games. And it really gave me this fascinating set of insights into how people were living lives. And it's given me a lot to think about in terms of what's most important to me and what it is I want to do next.
I think you're going on carpools. That's so fun.
I had the benefit of just having this time and being able to be present with people. I had nowhere to go. So either I sit at home chopping up the salad for dinner until they get back home, or I ride along. And again, as one who doesn't have kids, it was a fascinating insight into the realities that people face. I think I had a hard enough time managing myself in doing this job, but let alone working all day. And then felt like you would drop a kid off and then we would just get home and then we'd have to turn around and pick them up again. So I full respect to working parents. It's amazing people manage to get anything done, let alone be mindful and creative and the rest between work and home responsibilities. So definitely got a much better appreciation for the challenges parents face as well.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we were talking about also before we started recording is just the slant of menopause and midlife that's out in the public domain. And I'm curious kind of what your take is on all of that and your consumption of it, how that's feeling for you.
Yeah, I'm going to continue my fangirl of all of your effort and everything that you're doing, but really applaud you for doing this podcast and a lot of the work that you're doing on Instagram and through Substack and the rest on menopause, because I think you're approaching it in a really healthy, thoughtful, and positive way in terms of encouraging women to take stock of their lives and be very thoughtful about the transition that they're experiencing, but also the positive things that come out of this. I should say from a larger perspective, I think it's great that society is talking now about menopause. This isn't something that our mothers' generations talked about. I think as kids, we all read, "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret." When that was the way we learned about getting your period and about getting bras. And I am one of the many people that thinks Judy Blume should write a Margaret in menopause book that could be a useful model for all of us of the changes that we're going through. So it's great that everybody is talking about it. I think the thing that's a little frustrating is none of the commentary is very positive. I've got a young niece and nephew, and you forget that, and again, with not having kids, my 7-year-old niece just lost her teeth. That's a pretty crazy thing to be 7 years old and your teeth are all falling out. You're a young boy and your voice is changing. But I remember, and again, maybe this is revisionist history, but I remember all of that in a much more exciting, positive way. You were becoming a teenager, you were becoming older, you were getting your big teeth, you were finally wearing bra. And it was seen as a positive growing up. And I think there really is this sense with menopause and midlife that all of this is ending and you're falling off this cliff and none of it is positive. And so I think it's good that people are talking about it. It's healthy that it's being discussed. A friend of mine in the UK works for a company that now enables people to be able to take days off work if needed for menopause related reasons. They did trainings in the office, including men, to be able to talk about the symptoms that women were experiencing. But I find that a lot of it is negative and frankly a little bit scary about all of these potentially horrible things that are going to start happening to our body.
Yeah. Yeah. It is good to raise awareness, but it is, of course. And yet it is also good to be able to just look at it in a way where we're like, this is can be a time of reinvention. A lot of people go into new careers or they move or they start relationships. So it's also a time where I think we're like, okay, I've lived probably more than I'm going to live. Right. And so I am like
Right.
at the middle, if I have a very long life, of my life. And so what is it that I want for myself and what am I waiting for, right? What changes can I make? What have I always wanted to do? Go see orangutans or, become a therapist that you're like, now's the time. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate your giving attention to that.
Yeah, I think I am definitely much more aware of time being finite now than I was in my 20s. When I was in my 20s, I never had much of an existential sense. I think when you're young, it's really easy to just stay in relationships that aren't working for years and years because there's this indefinite sense of your life. You can stay in jobs that aren't working. You can feel obligated to spend time with friends that maybe you don't necessarily like. And so one of the things that I've definitely noticed as a shift in my own life is wanting to be much more mindful and intentional about what I consume, where I live, where I work, how I'm spending my time, who I'm spending my time with. And I think a lot of that is driven by exactly what you said, that there is just this greater awareness that time is finite. And so you need to use it effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so important. So, my last question for you is the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. And so I'm wondering, how are you finding tranquility in a bit of chaos? I'll say, right? Travel can be a bit chaotic. It's also incredibly exciting, but it's also a bit uncomfortable. So, how are you inserting tranquility into your days on the road?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I find myself feeling a little bit churlish if I ever complain about the challenges that I have while traveling, because I recognize what a privileged position it is to be in. There is also something a little exhausting about traveling, especially on your own. I am constantly confronted with having to make decisions every day about where I'm going to go, how long am I going to stay, where am I going to eat, what am I going to do, in a way that you could just sit in your house for a week and order pizza and not have to make some of those decisions. So I've done a number of things. I think one of the things that I've done at various points throughout this trip is I've just turned my phone off. There was a period of time over the summer when I think all of the election chatter was really just reaching this fever pitch. We had questions about Biden, we had the attempted assassination of Trump, and it was just a lot of noise. And I think especially being alone during that in Indonesia, especially where I didn't have friends around to talk to, I just ended up turning off my phone. And I think digital detoxes are actually really good ways and things that anybody, wherever they are, can do just to shut out the noise and then be able to go for a walk, to go for a swim, to do yoga, whatever it is you need to do without all of the outside noise really affecting how you are thinking about things. I've continued to try and work as much yoga into my days as I can. It's been a great experience on the road to be able to check out yoga in lots of different countries and lots of different styles and ways. I tried acro yoga in Bali for the first time, which was a very unique experience. And so try and find ways to bring that in. And then food is also something that I've really enjoyed. And so nice wine as well, of which there is a lot here in Portugal. And then finally, I would say it's really been the opportunity to explore new places and meet new people. I think in Washington, especially with so much churn all the time, and even just in the world generally, we've got so many Americans that were terribly affected by the hurricanes. We've got people in the Middle East and Ukraine that are suffering in the middle of military conflicts, that there's a lot of negative things that are happening in the world. And I think one of the things that this trip has done for me is giving me the chance to remember that there's also a lot of beauty in the world, and there's also a lot of really wonderful people. And so it's also been incredibly soul affirming to take the time to explore, to make new friends, to listen to other people's stories, to look at sunsets in different places and leave behind some of the noise and remember that there's a lot of good at the same time as we also still have a lot of suffering.
Thank you. Such good reminders, Amanda. It's so good to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thank you for having me.